Vanakkam. To begin with, let me thank Mr. Armugam Parasuraman of Thirukkkural and UNESCO, International Thirukkkural Foundation, Mauritius, Ms. Dr. Chandrika Subramaniam of Tamil Valarchi Mandram, Australia, Mr. C. Rajendran of Voice of World Family, India, and Mr. Partha Sarathi of Valetable.com, and all the others who are present, all the scholars and eminent personalities who are present in this meeting, for giving me an opportunity to share whatever little that I know with you all. We have chosen the topic good governance. Let me bring in my PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Yeah. So when we track and trace the beginning of formal governance, it takes us back to the days of chieftains of clans. Clans, a group of people tracing descendants from one common ancestor, primary social order before the advent of monarchy. This prevailed in almost all parts of the world. Each clan had a set of rules, no violations permitted, violators will be punished. Group head or the chieftain is supposed to protect the individuals of his clan. Later on, kingdoms emerged, kingdoms, empires, and kings, monarchy emerged. The most important responsibility of the ruler or the king is to protect the state from external aggression, maintain law and order, safeguarding the welfare of the people. When we talk of monarch and the rule, it is not out of place to mention a few words about the works of three great persons whose works withstood the test of time. That gives us an idea of the governance prevailed in those days. Arthasastra of Kautilya, Machiavelli's The Prince, Utopia of Thomas More. Arthasastra, written about in the 4th century BC, comprising of about 6,000 slokas. Wide range is covered in detail, like foreign policy, land administration, wages for officers, servants, administration of justice, punishment for crimes, preparedness for war, strategies, and espionage. His detailing goes like this: test to be carried out on servants before the selection of them, duties of various officers, law and administration of justice, complete code of law, punishment and various crimes, punishment for various crimes, foreign policy, preparedness of war, various divisions, how the conquered territory must be ruled. So he goes into details of the complete administration, even the spies, their disguises, the roles and responsibility of the spies, reporting system, etc. are also mentioned in Arthasastra. But one important advice he gives to the king is neighbor is to be considered as an enemy, and enemy's enemy is a friend. These are all the two very important statements made by Kautilya. Kautilya is known as an advocate of immoral and unethical policies and practice by a few people. It is a debatable point, as they were required because the interest of the state demanded it, or because the person against whom these were directed were enemies of the state. The end justifies the means, according to Kautilya. Kautilya's writings are based on the principle that no one can be trusted, not even the wife of the king. Arthasastra is completely written from the point of view of the king. An interesting aspect, it is not out of place to mention an interesting aspect which is written in Kautilya's Arthasastra. Kautilya suggests the idea of two kinds of touchstones, oracle. One which overestimates the quality of gold sold by the king, the other which underestimates the quality when bought by the king. So, whereas this needs to be compared with that of our Thiruvalluvar's words, Vanigam Seivarku Vanigam Peni, Piravum Tamabor Cheyin in Nadu Nilamai, as thriving trader is the trader known who guards another's interest as his own. When we come to the next writer, Machiavelli, The Prince, which was written in the year 1513 in Italy. The Prince was a practical guide to the ruler than an abstract treatise of philosophy. A king is to be feared than be loved. The people are considered as subjects and not as citizens. Appearance of virtue is more important than virtue. Machiavelli was a very clever politician and a minister, kept king's interest in mind. Machiavelli had a strong view that people are ignorant and that they will not go against the king. Men by nature are followers. They are used to obeying simple-minded creature. They are simple-minded creature who will not revolt against the government, according to Machiavelli. And he says, in order to keep the people under his spell, the king's duty is to create a feeling of patriotism, and they should be made to believe that the ruler is the state and the state is the ruler. Machiavelli even talks of pitting one group of people against another group in order to maintain his hold over the kingdom. Then comes Utopia, written by Thomas More in England in the year 1516. Utopia is an imaginary society based on rational thought, communal property. No class distinction was there and no poverty was there in Utopia. Considered to be developed based on Plato's city, originally written in Latin and later on translated to many other languages, where a near perfect institution prevails, almost impossible, far-fetched economics, government, justice with equality in all fields. The government has a crucial role to play in maintaining material well-being of the nation and its people. Policies of Utopia are clearly superior to that of European countries. Whatever that is written by Thomas More in Utopia were considered to be far much more superior than the rules which were or the laws existed in the days of him in many parts of Europe. Here again, he makes an interesting statement. Capital punishment was in vogue in the days of Thomas More. Even for minor crimes, people were put to death. Even a small theft was a person who committed a small crime like a petty theft was also put to death. Whereas Thomas More says death will not stop a person from stealing in order to put food on his table. Theft doesn't warrant death. Instead, ensure that everyone has enough to eat, he says. The system must eliminate the crime and not the criminals. A similarity can be found with that of Valluvar's words, Takkangu nadi thaisella vannattal ottangu veruppadu vendu. Takkangu nadi thaisella vannattal ottangu veruppadu vendu, veruvanda cheyyamai. Who punishes investigation made in due degree so as to stay in advance of crime. A king is supposed to make people not to commit crimes. That's what is meant by this quarrel. One more interesting, let me take a few more minutes about Utopia. People were permitted, religions were there. There was no one particular religion which was propagated by the government of Utopia. People were free to follow and worship, follow the religions of their faith. One interesting thing is that they were all asked to assemble in the one and the same place to conduct worship. That is one thing. Then the dignity of labor. In the days of Utopia, in the days of Thomas More, in England, only the poor peasants were made to work, and all the others enjoyed the fruits of the work carried out by the poor people and the peasants. The rich people, the intelligent people, clergy, kings, lords, everybody enjoyed the fruits of the others. Whereas in Utopia, Thomas More says, everyone is supposed to work. There is no rich, no poor, he says. So So that's how he upholds the idea that people are all equal in utopia. Utopia is not not ideal because its people are perfect, but because its laws makes it so that the citizen must act perfectly despite the inherent feelings as human. Utopia is considered to be a unique combination of freedom and repression. Now, these having spoken a few words about Arthasastra, Kautilya, Thomas More, and Machiavelli, it is not out of place to make a brief comparison with Thiruvalluvar and these three greats. The works of these three greats withstood the test of time, and similarly, our Thiruvalluvar's work also withstood the test of time. Valluvaran, the three people were considered to be close to their king. They were active politicians. Thomas More, Machiavelli, and Kautilya were active politicians, held positions of office in the government, whereas Thiruvalluvar did not hold any position of power, nor was he considered as very close to any king or anything like that. On the other hand, these three people wrote from the point of view of the kings. They kept the interest of the king in their mind while they wrote the book. Whereas Thiruvalluvar wrote everything from the point of view of the common man, trader, administrators, and the king. His main aim was to bring peace, amity in the society. In Thirukkkural, Valluvar on governance, Valluvar spoke a lot about governance, and one such thing is upright governance. Thirukkkural says, Kodai Ali Sengol Kudi Ombal Nankum Udayanam Vendar Kuli in Eremachi. He is the light of kings who has their four things: beneficence, benevolence, rectitude, and care for his people. And in another Thirukkkural, he says, the sage scripture and virtue spring from the scepter of a stately king. Andanar Nurkum Arathirkum Adiyai Nindrudu Mannavan Kol. It is not the javelin that gives the victory, but the king's scepter, if we do no injustice. Velendru Vendri Tarvadu Mannan Koladugum Kodadinin. These are all on upright government, whereas on unjust government also, he says, the property gives more sorrow than poverty to those who live under the scepter of a king without injustice. Inmayin innadu udamai murai seyya mannavan keel kol keel padin. One more Thirukkkural, acting against with a reign of terror, he says, Kallar pinikkum kadungol aduvalladu illai nilaikku porai. Patiently to bear with and show kindness to those who grieve us is the most excellent of all dispositions. Oruthatrum Pandinar Kannum, Kannodi, Oruthatrum Pande Talai. Good governance is not the result of the intentions and efforts of the king alone. It depends on so many others and also other factors. And Valluvar guides the kings, the subjects, the ministers, the traders, agents, administrators of the king in order to ensure good governance is rendered. So those are the days of the monarchy, the king's empires. In those days, it was considered Thirudai Mannare Kanil Thirumalai Kandene. I saw Thirumal in the sight of God. Divine right was in vogue. The king was considered as a descendant of God. He derived the power to rule from God. King is not, in those days, king was not accountable to any authority. So those were the days, divine right. But later, divine right of the king was challenged and democracy evolved over a period of time. And at present, democratic governments are in many parts of the world. Monarchy has given way to democracy. It took a few hundred years from the days of Magna Carta to reach where it is today. Even though the city-states in Athens and a few more places of Rome were elected by the people, it was confined to a very limited area, and the electors too were rich and powerful and not the common men. Now, the democratic governments are in power in many parts of the world. The will of the people prevails now, at least on paper in these countries. The sovereignty lies with the people. The constitution is the embodiment and solemn expression of the will of the people. The tenure of the government is fixed, and the people has the power to choose the representatives, and in turn, government at regular intervals. Democratically elected government is expected to fulfill the aspirations of the people. Major features of the democratic government are a good government is accountability and transparency. It should be based on the rule of law. It should be participatory in nature, and it should include all sections of the society. It must be a consensus-oriented thing, and the government is supposed to be responsive to the needs of the people. And Valluvar addresses all these aspects. Valluvar addresses accountability and transparency, rule of law, participatory and inclusiveness in nature, consensus and responsiveness. Rule of law, Sengonmai, again, Velendru Vendri Tharuvathu, Mannavan, Koladuvum, Kodathenin. It is not the javelin that gives the victory, but the king's scepter if it do no justice. On accountability and transparency, Valluvar says, the prosperity of him who lives without knowing the measure will perish, even while it seems to continue. Alaverindu vaazhadan vaalkai, ulabola, illahi thondra kedu. The people, the electors, empower the representatives. The elected representatives are, the representatives are elected by the people. And these representatives are supposed to serve the people with honesty and sincerity. They should realize that they are accountable to the people. If they fail to do so, and if they simply exceed their limit, they will lose their power and privileges. This is what is given by Thiruvalluvar in Thirukkkural, Alaverindu vaazhadan vaalkai, ulabola, illahi thondra kedu. Similarly, one more Thirukkkural also is there, which says, the prosperity Nalthorum Nadi Morisaya Manavan, Nalthorum Nadu Kedum. The country of the king who does not daily examine the wrongs done and distribute justice will daily fall to ruin. Accountability and transparency must be there. And as part of it, the king is supposed to daily examine the wrongs done by his officers, by his people, and distribute justice. Otherwise, the government or the country will daily fall to ruin, he says. And consensus is an important aspect. Consensus among the people, when he implements whatever the rules, consensus, building up consensus is an important aspect of a government, especially in a democratically elected government. The rulers are supposed to take the entire society with them. So, and what goes against consensus is hell, hostility. So he talks about, Valluvar talks about hostility and the ills of hostility. Joy of joys abundant grows when malice dies, that woe of woes. Inbathul inbam payakkum, igalennum tunbam, tunbathul tunbam kedin, he says. And on inclusiveness, the greatness of the king is dependent on the inclusiveness he shows to all his subjects, showing no discrimination. A ruler, an elected representative, or the ruler is not supposed to discriminate the people based on the race, religion, caste, color, or creed. So the king will be esteemed a god among men who performs his own duties and protects his subjects. That is the greatness of a king. Iraimaatsi. Murai seidu kaapatrum mannavan markatku irai endru vaikappadum. Vallur also says what a ruler should avoid: avarice, undignified pride, low pleasures are false in a king or a ruler. Correction of false, he says in Kutrangadidal. Avarice, undignified pride, and low pleasures are false in a ruler. Ivaralu, Manbiranda Manamum, Mana Uvahayum, Edam Iraiku, he says. And from monarchy to democracy, there is a U-turn. The people gets a government they deserve because it is they who elect the representatives. And it is here Vallur's words are ringing in our ears. Vallur's sagacious words perfectly match even to this new situation. His words perfectly advisory in nature to the king, to the ministers in the days of monarchy. Now, in this new scenario, in the democratic environment also, his couplets perfectly matches as advice to the electors as well as to the elected representatives. The electors are guided to choose good representatives so that they get a good governance. The electors are guided to choose a good representative. Before going to the voting booth, Vallur says the elector is advised to choose a representative based on Anbu, Arivu, Tetram, Avavinmai, Nantu, Nangudayan Gatte Telugu. Let the choice fall upon him who largely possesses these four things: love, knowledge, a clear mind, and freedom from covetousness, he says. And he cautions the electors. He even forewarns them. Even when an elector has tried them in every possible way before going to the voting booth, there are many men who change from nature of the works in which they may be employed. So he cautions or forewarns the elector. Like that he says. Also, Varumunnar Kavadan Vatkai, Yerimunnar Vaituru Pola Kedum. He cautions the elector to elect the right person. If he fails to do so, a wrong choice will make him helpless and expectations will perish like straw kept in presence of fire. The prosperity of him who does not timely guard against the false will perish like straw before fire. These are the words meant for the elector before he goes to the voting booth. Now, to make democracy workable, those in power should exercise tolerance and self-restraint. Bertrand Russell said, to make democracy workable, those in power should exercise tolerance and self-restraint. A word of advice by Vallur to the people who are elected. To those in power, the tendency to assert power will be very high. So self-restraint is a must. In democracy, freedom of speech is indispensable. The press and public are bound to criticize the government. Sometimes small matters may be even blown out of proportions. But the leader is supposed to exhibit patience and self-restraint. Vallur says very clearly, Sevi Kaipa Sorporukum Panpudai Vendam Kavigai Kil Tangum Ulagu. The whole world, hello? The whole world will dwell under the umbrella of a king who can bear words that embitter ear. And Kadidochi Mella Erihe, Nedidaka Ningame Vendubavar. Let the leader who desires that his prosperity may long remain with him make inquiries that strictness and punish with mildness. Tolerance and self-restraint are very important even with the ruler. That is why he says, Kadidochi Mella Erihe, let the leader who desires his prosperity may long remain with him, make inquiries with strictness and punish with mildness, he says. To achieve all this, Valluvar wants the elected government and the ruler to be surrounded by not by yes men, not by sycophants. The leader should cherish great men and make them his own. That will ensure him to render good governance. It is not an easy affair. Nevertheless, he is supposed to do it. Guidance from great men to cherish great men and make them his own is most difficult of all things. அறியவற்றுள் எல்லாம் அரிதே பெரியாரை பேணி தமரா குழல். Thus, Thirukkkural advises the electors and the elected to ensure good governance through rule of law, inclusiveness, transparency and accountability, self-restraint and tolerance, and selection of the representatives. Apart from the generalities which we have discussed, Thirukkkural speaks on a few specifics which are considered as important factors of good governance in the modern era. One such specific is project management. Project management as part of good governance. The government spends enormous funds on projects in order to establish infrastructure development and to help common and poor people of the state in projects of health, sanitation, education, protection of environment, and so on. To get the maximum returns of the social benefits out of the investment, these projects must be conceived properly, implemented well within the time frame, and within the estimated cost and with good quality. Getting the best results out of invested money in projects is an important aspect of good governance. And this is recognized by funding agencies, World Bank, and nations which help poor nations. Thirukkkural talks of selection of projects to benefit the poor, employing the right people for implementing it, choosing the right time frame in the following chapters, like method of acting after due consideration, தெரிந்து செயல்வகை, தெரிந்து வினையாடல், employment of duly selected agents, recognition of opportunities, recognition of power, recognition of place, காலம் அறிதல், வலி அறிதல், இடன் அறிதல். These 5 chapters, these 50 Thirukkurals goes a long way in completing the project and ensuring that the benefit reaches the common man, the beneficiary to whom the projects were meant for. Another important specific factor of good governance. Good governance generally promotes innovation, economic freedom, and competitiveness. However, the quality of the governance in turn depends on the attributes of the people involved. The quality of the governance depends on the attributes of the people. This is very important. In other words, the attributes of the people, their cognitive abilities, and in turn, the cognitive capital of the nation are interrelated with good quality of governance. They are all attribute of the people, quality of governance, increase of wealth of nations, competitiveness are all closely interrelated. So attributes of the people, cognitive abilities, reasoning, problem solving, planning, idea comprehension, and abstract thinking are considered to be the cognitive abilities. And when these qualities, when these aspects, these factors goes up in a common man and the cognitive ability increases, the cognitive capital of the nation goes up. In an analysis based on international data, government effectiveness was related to the cognitive human capital of the society as a whole, of the intellectual class and leading politicians. The importance of cognitive capital was reflected in the rate of innovation, the degree of economic freedom, and the country's competitiveness, all of which were found to have an impact on the level of productivity. Cognitive capital must be carefully cultivated by most forward-looking policies. So, Valluvar speaks about reasoning, problem solving, planning, idea comprehension, abstract thinking in order to increase the cognitive ability of the common man and the cognitive capital of a nation. Reasoning, எப்பொருள் யார் யார் வாய் கேட்பினும் அப்பொருள் மெய்ப்பொருள் காண்பது அறிவு. To discern the truth in everything by whomsoever spoken, this is wisdom. Then on problem solving, he says, நோய் நாடி, நோய் முதல் நாடி, அது தணிக்கும் வாய் நாடி, வாய்ப்பச் செயல். Let the physician ascertain the nature of the disease, its causes, and the means for its cure, and treat it according to medical rules. Though it comes in the chapter medicine, Marundu, it is applicable to so many other aspects of normal life and political life, in project planning, implementation of projects, abilities, learning, everything. On planning, he says, ஆற்றின் வருந்தா வருத்தம் பலர் நின்று போற்றினும் பொத்துப்படும். The work which is not done by suitable methods will fail, although many stand up to protect it. வினை வலியும் தன் வலியும் மாற்றான் வலியும் துணை வலியும் தூக்கிச் செயல். In வலியறிதல், he says, king weighs the strength of the deed he proposes to do. Let him consider the own strength and the strength of his enemy and the strength of their allies, and both of them before acting on it. துணை வலி தன் வினை வலியும் தன் வலியும் மாற்றான் வலியும் துணை வலியும் தூக்கிச் செயல். On idea comprehension, Valluvar says, அழிவதுவும் ஆவதுவும் ஆகி வழிப்பயக்கும் ஊதியமும் சூழ்ந்து செயல். Let a man reflect what will be lost, what will be acquired, and from these, what will be his ultimate gain, and then let him act. And on abstract thinking, he says, the method of acting, வினை செயல் வகை, முடிவும் இடையூறும் முற்றியாங்கு எய்தும் படுபயனும் பார்த்து செயல். An action is to be performed with due consideration as to exertion required, the obstacles to be encountered, and the great profit to be gained on its completion. Thus, the cognitive capital increase the increase of cognitive capital increases the wealth of the nation and gives more opportunity for good governance. Democracy is a system considered to be the least. Democracy is a system considered to be the with least deficiency among various forms of governments. It is imperative that we protect and promote the democratic system in order to ensure good governance. The specific challenges and threats faced by democracies must be addressed in order to ensure good governance. Increased expectations of the people is one of the great challenges, new challenges that is coming up in the recent days. Even though there is growth all around, still we live in an age of contradiction. Gluttony and hunger, growth and destruction of nature, material income growth and stress, depression coexist. Thus, here exists a great challenge to the rulers of governments. That too, after the breakout of pandemic, the challenges has become a tougher one. Expectations from governments has skyrocketed. Governments are expected to be geared for facing new and unprecedented challenges. Another specific challenge faced by democratically elected governments is immigration and multi-ethnic minorities. This is a specific challenge being faced by the democratically elected governments. Immigration and sustaining multi-ethnic democracy is a challenge. If there is influx of refugees, the government feels the pressure of taking care of them without sacrificing or compromising the interest of its citizen. And Valluvar discusses even this topic. Porayorungu மேல் வருங்கால் தாங்கி இறைவர்க்கு இறையொருங்கு நேர்வது நாடு. A kingdom is that which can bear any burden that may be pressed on it from adjoining nations and yet pay the full tribute to its sovereign. This challenge of immigration and multi-ethnic minorities is also influx of refugees is also addressed by Thiruvalluvar. Apart from this, if these challenges, there are a few specific threats to democracy and good governance. One such threat, UNESCO's preamble says that wars are created in the minds of the people. One such idea that cropped in the minds of the people, which harms the people, which is a threat to the people of the world, is pride. Pride of nationality, pride of race, pride of religion, pride of color, race, religion, caste, creed, all this, the pride of these things causes conflict among the people. Pride, Bertrand Russell says, pride of nationality, creed, color, class are politically harmful because pride leads to prejudice. Belief of this kind is harmful. One of the aims of education should be to eradicate them, he says. And Valluvar addresses this also. Thirukku, in the chapter Pride, he says, in the chapter Kutrangedal, he says, Thirukku, Sinamum, Sirumayum illar, Perukam perubide nirthu. Truly great is the excellence of those kings or rulers who are free from pride, anger, and lust. If the ruler is free from pride, he will excel. Truly, he will be a person of excellence, he says. Viyavarka enyandrum thannai, nayavarka nandri payava vinai. Let no ruler praises himself at any time. Let him not desire to do useless things. In correction of false Kutrangadal, he says. And in Valiyaridal, he says, Amaindang Uruhalan, Alavariyan, Tannai Viyandan, Virendu Kadum, Tannai Viyandan, Virendu Kadum. He will quickly perish who, ignorant of the measures of his resources, flatters himself with an idea of his greatness and does not live in peace with his neighbors. One more threat which is looming large in many parts of the world is polarization. Polarization is faced by, if polarization is faced by democracy, democracy will perish. Polarization of the people of the nation by the ruler or by the majority of the people showing ill towards the minorities of the nation is a big threat to democracy and in turn to the peace and prosperity of the nation. Valluvar talks against polarization, which is a threat to democracy. Ottadarivan uyir vaalvan, matrayan settarul vaikappadum. He truly lives who knows and discharges the proper duties of benevolence. He who knows them not will be reckoned among the dead. And he suggests mankind to learn to live in peace with everyone. Kakai karava karindumnum akamum anna neerarke ulla. The crowd do not conceal their prey, but will call out for others to share with them while they eat it. Wealth will be with those who show the similar disposition towards the relatives or, in our case, minorities. Democracy is the form of governance in almost half of the nations as of now in the world. Half the population is under democratically elected governments, where the possibility of good governance is more compared with any other form of governance. Democratically elected governments has the probability and possibility of rendering better governance to the people. But many problems are being faced by the humanity now transcends the boundaries of the nation, like carbon emission, global warming, sea level rising, etc. The solution to these problems too transcends the boundaries of the nations. When the problem transcends the boundaries, the results too, or the solutions too, transcends the boundaries of the nation. People should be prepared and cultivated to think beyond their boundaries. The challenge and threats of these problems which transcend the boundaries of nations are being addressed by UNESCO. It is striving to achieve global peace through a multi-pronged strategy, which includes reduction of poverty, strengthening democratic institutions, reaching the sustainable development goals, good governance, and so on. And a very important action is to convert people of the earth into global citizens through education. Global citizen, converting people into global citizens by imparting shared universal values, empathy, knowledge of global issues, their interconnectedness, ability to communicate, appreciation of diversity, recognition of global issues and interconnectedness. All these things are there. And Valluvar, with his Arathupal and Porutpal, with those 108 chapters, prepares and inculcates the idea that we belong to a broader community. When a person reads Thirukkkural diligently and understands it properly, and when he adheres to it sincerely, he becomes a global citizen. Kural inculcates all the qualities of global citizen in the person who follows it. Thirukkkural is a fitting tool as a book of the world, book of mankind, as it is beyond caste, creed, color, race, nationality. One example of converting a citizen of a state into a global citizen is Talatri Tanda Porulellam Takkarku Velanmai Seidar Poruttu. All the wealth acquired with perseverance by worthy is for the exercise of benevolence. This Kural alone exhibits the quality of a global citizen. Thus, in order to ensure good governance, Thirukkkural speaks, among other aspects, Thirukkkural speaks against polarization. Thirukkkural speaks harmful ideas like pride, arrogance, which will lead to conflict. And Kural speaks for increasing efficiency of services through project management skills, increasing cognitive capital of nation to elect a government which will deliver good governance, creating global citizens to maintain peace and harmony among the mankind and to face formidable challenges which are transcending the boundaries of the nations. We can see a striking similarity between the goals of UNESCO and Thirukkkural. The goals of UNESCO and Thirukkkural are one and the same: peace, prosperity, harmony, and good governance. And the means of achieving them also are one and the same: love, empathy, compassion, the non-discrimination, and education. So, thus it goes to say that Thirukkkural will go a long way in achieving the goals of UNESCO. I think with this, let me thank the organizers once again before I conclude. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mute, sir. Yours in mute.
Now it's okay, sir. I think
Yeah.
Now I am audible. Sir,
sorry, sir. I received a call from one of the members, participants, Valitamil Saktivel. That is why I had to attend the call, because I thought something was going wrong.
Yeah, okay,
So,
no problem.
since I received a call from him, I had to immediately respond. I am sorry for the which I was not supposed to do, but since it was a call from one of the participants, I thought I should respond.
Some question maybe. Thank you very much, sir, for the excellent presentation. It is indeed a treat on this weekend. And now it's time to invite questions from our participants. Any questions? And friends, we welcome your questions. And Sir Kathiravan sir will be actually throwing light on the subject. Am I audible? You can unmute now. Participants can unmute now. Hello. நண்பர்கள் அனைவரும் தங்களுடைய இணைப்பில் வருமாறு கேட்டுக்கொள்கிறோம். அன்மியூட் செய்தால் நாம் பேசுவது அனைவருக்கும் கேட்கும். உங்களுடைய கேள்விகளை கேட்குமாறு தாழ்மையுடன் கேட்டுக்கொள்கிறேன்.
Sir, this is Subhatra. Yeah. So such questions எதுவும் இல்லை, பட் என்னோட ஒரு ஜஸ்ட் ஒப்பீனியன் ஃபீட்பேக் மாதிரி கொடுக்க விரும்புகிறேன். ஸோ திருக்குறள் இன்றைய கலவிலையும் எப்படி நம்மளுக்கு உபயோகமா இருக்குன்றது இந்த டாக் மூலமா தெரிஞ்சுக்கிட்டோம். அண்ட் ஒரு அதிகாரமும் எடுத்து அதை எப்படி இந்த யுனெஸ்கோவோட இந்த டாபிக்கு லிங்க் பண்ணி அழகா சொல்லியிருந்தாங்க. ஸோ இனிமேல் படிக்கும்போது இன்னும் இன்டெப்தா எப்படி படிச்சு கத்துக்கிறதுன்றது புரிஞ்சுக்க முடிஞ்சது.
ரொம்ப நன்றி மிஸ் சுபத்ரா.
நன்றி.
திருக்குறளுக்கு தான் பெருமை சேரும்.
கண்டிப்பா இதை லிங்க் பண்றது, மேப் பண்றதுன்னு சொல்லணும், இல்ல எப்படி இன்றளவுலயும் அதை கத்துக்க முடியுது எங்களால. அதுக்கு நன்றி.
ரொம்ப நன்றி. மகிழ்ச்சி.
வேற ஏதாவது கேள்வி இருக்கா நமக்கு? Do we have any questions? Shall we? Okay. If we do not have any more questions, shall we move on to the word of thanks? Okay. Okay. Good evening to all. It has been a wonderful evening listening to engineer sir, Mr. Kathiravan, who was actually a learned person who had field experience of more than 35 years and executing different projects across India. It just not actually it's actually it's a combination of knowledge which actually practiced into projects, successfully executing the projects that has happened before him, and his vision and his sir's experience across the fields has actually reflected in the presentation, which he actually saw through the Thirukkkural. From the point of view of Thirukkkural also, he has seen the aspects which is before us. Sir started with the genesis of governments and the governance and the literature on the subject, like in India, Arthashastra by Kautilya, and it's there, which is written from the king's point of view, and later with Machiavelli's Prince, which is again supportive of king's action and how to rule the kingdom and ignoring the people. And thirdly, Utopia by Thomas More. That literature actually, and also he brought into the picture by comparing Thirukkkural, which is actually we wonder why Thirukkkural is one of the finest literature of the world, applicable to every geography, every people, and all the times. And that's what the presentation has made us understand. And the sir saw the Thirukkkural through the prism of good governance, and I'm also so enjoyed bringing Kural examples from different adhikarams, which actually suits every topic which has been discussed here, for the individuals, for the society, for the king, for the governance, and for the neighbors, and how the global situation will be gaining if at all this is going to be practiced. And there is no minor or narrow view of Thirukkkural anywhere. whereas other literature have been through seeing the governance aspect through a narrow spectrum, whereas Thirukural is a broader spectrum which actually encompasses every good thing, what is do's and don'ts. And I was really surprised to see the principles of the good governance as defined by the World Bank has been comprehensively covered by Thirukural, like the important points covered by, suggested by the World Bank is participation, rule of law, transparency in actions, responsiveness, consensus orientation, equity, effectiveness and efficiency, accountability. And Sarah has actually in different slides covered all these aspects, quoting the appropriate quotes for this. And this is actually, we are really overwhelmed by the wisdom of Thirukural, which is actually made us to appreciate that these concepts are global in our view, and it is for the benevolence of everyone in the world living there. That's what the UNESCO is about. That's what the world countries are looking at now, because we no longer live in divided geographies. Globalized situation, it makes us to work together, and that has been brought out very well. So it is my pleasure and privilege to thank Mr. Kathiravan sir, Kathiravan Ayya, on behalf of International Thirukural Foundation Mauritius, Tamil Valarchi Mandram Australia, Voice of Valduvar India, valaithamil.com, and the participants in the 26th International Online Conference on Thirukural, and my own behalf. அனைவருக்கும் நன்றி. ஐயா கதிரவன் அவர்களுக்கும் அனைவரின் சார்பாக எங்களுடைய மனமார்ந்த நன்றியை அவருடைய நேரத்துக்காகவும் அவருடைய அனுபவத்தை பகிர்ந்து கொண்டதுக்காகவும், திருக்குறள் எவ்வாறு நம்மளுடைய வாழ்க்கையில் எந்த நிலையிலும் கூட வரும், அது அரசாங்கத்துக்காகட்டும், தனி மனிதராக இருக்கும், தனி மனிதர் கடமைகளை எவ்வாறு செய்ய வேண்டும் என்று பல்வேறு அருமையாக குறிப்பிட்டார். ஒரு முத்தாய்ப்பாக ஒரு குறளை சொல்லி நன்றி கூற விரும்புகிறேன். குறள் எண் 212, ஒப்புரவு அறிதல். இந்த ஒரு குறள் ஒன்று போதுங்க. நம் திருக்குறள் வந்து குளோபலாக சிந்திச்சிருக்காங்க. வசுதேவ குடும்பகம் அப்படிலாம் சொல்லியிருக்காங்க. உலகம் முழுவதுக்காக ஒரு குறள் இருக்கு அப்படின்னா இந்த குறளை சொல்லலாம். தாளாற்றி தந்த பொருள் எல்லாம் தக்கார்க்கு வேளாண்மை செய்த பொருட்டு அப்படின்னு ஒரு போர்க்குறள்ல உலகம் முழுவதுக்கும் நம்ம இப்படிதான் ஒப்புரவு அப்படின்ற இந்த ஒரு வார்த்தையை வந்து செய்யறதுக்கே நம்ம பெருமைப்படலாம். திருவள்ளுவருக்கு நன்றி சொல்லலாம். அந்த குறளை எடுத்துக்காட்டாக கொடுத்த ஐயா அவர்களுக்கு மீண்டும் ஒருவன் நன்றி. அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
நன்றி ஐயா. நன்றி, வணக்கம்.